The Portfolio Composer, episode 225.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of the Portfolio Composer.
That balance of serving my needs as an artist and serving the audience's needs, and I include the director in the category of audience, how do you serve their needs simultaneously? And I'm looking at it as not serving a specific need for the audience, but serving that existential need, like what Steve Jobs had once said. You've got to figure out and give people what they don't know they need yet. And so that's where we as artists really have to think two steps ahead. We've got to invent something that people haven't yet thought of.
This episode is sponsored by Encoda, the home of digital sheet music. With the Encoda app, you can stream sheet music from the world's greatest publishing houses, including Boozy and Hawkes, Baron Writer, Chester, Novello, and more. The music you stream is fully licensed for performance, and as a conductor or composer, you can push out markings and on-the-fly edits to your ensemble. You can even upload your own PDFs to the Encoda sheet music reader. Download Encoda from your app store today for a free trial. That's Encoda, spelled N-K-O-D-A, Encoda. This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Just released, Dorico Pro 3 is a major new version with game-changing advances in note input, notation, and engraving. Also available from Steinberg is Dorico Elements, an entry-level application that packs all of the essential power of Dorico Pro into a simple, streamlined package that is ideal for those getting started. Find out more later in the show. Hello, and welcome to episode 225 of the Portfolio Composer podcast. I am your host, your coach, and your teacher, Garrett Hope. I'm so grateful that you're listening to this podcast. I was particularly interested in speaking with today's guest, Simon Taufique, because of his unique background and experience. He has started businesses, he is a legit entrepreneur, he is a tech innovator, and he is a composer with an economic and business background. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. Simon is a South Asian, UK-born composer in New York City and has collaborated with iconic filmmakers and artists Mary Herron, M. Night Shyamalan, Julian Casablancas, and David Torn. Some of his notable projects include Imperium with Daniel Radcliffe and Toni Collette, She's Lost Control, Are You Glad I'm Here, The Interpreters, and Jesus Henry Christ, which was produced by Julia Roberts. Enjoy. Simon, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to speak with you.
It's so great to speak to you, Garrett.
The name of the podcast comes from the business and investment world, where the idea is to have a diversified portfolio of income-producing assets. And I believe as a composer, we can have multiple things that we do within music to generate the revenue we need to pay the bills and live and so on. And so that's part of the philosophy of the show. And I like to ask people, and this is my first question to you, Simon, what is in your portfolio? What are the things that you do as a creative that generate income right now?
I would say that my greatest asset in my portfolio is that I deliver on solving a problem or fulfilling a need for my filmmakers. And that need is essentially emotional insurance for their story. And anybody can crank out some amazing music for a film. They're coming out of the film and music schools by the thousands. And so it's not necessarily a question of skill or talent. I think it's more a question of, is this somebody who can fulfill the emotional needs of what the story is trying to tell? And that's a very unique thing to offer. So what I try to do is help the filmmaker fall in love with the film that they originally intended to make. And then by the time they reach me, which is usually a year or two down the line, at the end of that very long food chain, they are very disenfranchised from that initial spark. They have fallen out of love. They have burnt out. They've gotten fatigued by this whole process. And flipping off of my composer hat and putting on my producer hat, I've been able to see what this journey is like from beginning to end. So when I put my composer hat back on, I get to look at this filmmaker and see this journeyman or journeywoman who has really climbed a very tall mountain to get here. And what they're looking for in my music is not just a gorgeous sounding score for the scene or for this climax. What they're looking for is somebody who understands the story and what their journey was to get that story out and can discover what that narrative is really about and communicate that through the music. And so I'm excavating a lot of what these filmmakers put into their story and have now since forgotten. So it's very much it's like an archaeological or psychological dig into their psyche. And as we know, most stories are somewhat autobiographical. So there is this personal voice that's there, and you hope that's there because you want stories to be intimate and you want them to have a stake. And so you try to find out what that is. And when I can show the filmmaker that I understand that, then I become part of their storytelling team. I'm now part of that dynamic rather than just this serviceman who is just giving them a bunch of audio files. I'm trying to go way beyond that. And that happened very accidentally, but that's where I have ended up.
Huh. Okay, you have said so many incredible things, and I want to follow up on almost all of it. But I'm going to come back to you. What are the other things you're doing? So you're delivering a score, a bespoke score, and I love everything you said, but what else is going on in your career?
So just to back up, before I got into film and music, I was trying to find my way, and I will get back to where we are now because it all has woven into the answer to your question is,
sure,
what am I doing now? I'm producing films. I teach film and TV producing at NYU. I'm a mentor with the Hollywood Radio Television Society. I'm on their board. I'm a consultant for Tribeca Film Festival on their shorts programming committee. I'm on different juries. I mean, I've really found myself in a lot of different areas within film. Some of it has to do with film music. Some of it has to do with the larger scope of filmmaking. And all of that came from when I started, before I even knew what I wanted to do. I was a tech geek. I just happened to have an affinity for that. I did not study it. I studied political science and economics in college. And while I was studying that, I was also just goofing around with the guitar. And I ended up becoming best friends with a filmmaker, a student filmmaker at NYU while I was there. And he turned into M. Night Shyamalan. And so I got to, it was an incredible partnership and friendship. I mean, he was the best man at my wedding. I mean, it was all this stuff that we were really very close and dear friends. And part of that friendship was him mentoring me into what he was learning as a filmmaker and as a very astute student of filmmaking and producing and the history of cinema. So he would drag me to his film classes and I would sit with him and he would tell me what was going on. And I was not interested in getting involved in film. I was a first generation immigrant from England. My family's from South Asia, first person in my family to go to college. The last thing I was ever going to try to do was find a career in a very speculative industry. I was going for a career in foreign service in the government to become an ambassador. I was going to go for my PhD or get a job as an economist or go to law school. So it was very tried and true career paths. And I got swayed by technology and then by creativity. When Knight said, "You got a talent here, you should do something with it." And I just dismissed that. And then when he was making some short films at NYU, he made a short film about me, just being a guitar player and just goofing around. And then he asked me to write a song with him. And then when he made his first studio feature, Wide Awake for Miramax, said, "We need some songs. You want to write something?" I wrote a song. I went into the studio. He loved it. His team loved it. So that was really my kickstart into this collaborative art form by being part of his collaboration team. The song coincidentally did not make it into the film, which also taught me a very valuable lesson that you can't be precious about this stuff. It's really what serves the needs of the film. And that film went through a very torturous journey and some things got left out and my song was one of them. But I really got hooked by how collaborative that process was, because even outside of the scope of the song, he was pulling me into production. I was on the set. I was reading the scripts. I was in post production. I met his composer, Edmund Choi. I got to really soak in all of these different facets of filmmaking. And I didn't realize that I was soaking it in for a future career. And then after that whole process, while I was working in technology, I invented, also by accident, the world's first online help desk.
Yeah.
And this was before cell phones. It was before the internet as we know it. And it was just to serve a need. I was working in tech support, and people would just pick up the phone and call you, or they would knock on your door and say, hey, I need you to help me. And it was very inefficient. So I came up with a system that was online, and you could get to the people that you need to through a website. And nobody was doing this at the time. And we couldn't buy a software that would do that. So I built it. And then that turned into a startup that I founded. And that took off, and it was really exciting. But I was really torn, because at that point, I was really debating whether or not I had a future in the arts, in music. I didn't know what I wanted to do in that, but I was a big fan of Brian Eno, I was a big fan of Daniel Lanois and those kinds of folks, and thought maybe that's a path. Did not see myself as a composer. I'm not formally trained. I didn't know how to write music. I knew how to noodle, I knew how to riff and things like that, but nothing that I would ever compare to what I saw film composers doing. And so I didn't consider that as a viable option. And then through technology and through the startup, that did really well. And then I left that world and said, I want to find what my real passion is. And I went on a soul searching mission, rented a recording studio for a year and just experimented, produced different bands and songwriters. I mixed, I mastered. I did a lot of that stuff and realized, even though I enjoyed what I was doing for them, and I think I did relatively decent work for them, I did not feel my own music was getting a voice. And I was putting too much of my voice into their music. And I didn't think that was fair. So coincidentally, at that time, someone else from the startup world happened to be producing a film and asked me if I would be interested in composing for it. And so I took a leap, and it worked out really well. The film ended up winning a bunch of awards. And even though I didn't know what I was doing, I knew what the film needed. And so through trial and error, I was able to deliver a score that we were all very surprised with how well it helped tell this very tender story. And I got hooked by that process. And I got, as you do when you have something that works, other people see it and they say, can you do that for my film?
Yeah.
So then that just kicked off. But fast forward a few more years, and I found myself in a situation where I'm composing for films, and there's not enough hands to go around to make the film the success it needs to be. There's not enough people diving in to solve the problems. And I remembered that process from the startup world, where I was fundraising, I was making alliances and partnerships. I was talking to publicists, I was talking to legal counsel. I was doing all of this stuff that you need to do to run a company. And now I found myself seeing producers of these films doing the same thing and needing help, because they're indie films. There's just, again, not enough money, not enough time or resources to throw at the problem. So I rolled up my sleeves and I asked if I could help. I would give them suggestions and provide connections. Hey, you should talk to so-and-so. What's your festival strategy? I know somebody at this festival. And before long, filmmakers started to consider me as somebody who they could bounce ideas off of outside of the realm of music. And so that slowly morphed into me being asked to produce. And so I as a composer, I've learned never to say no to an opportunity. So when a director comes up with a crazy musical idea, I've learned that crazy musical idea that I never would have thought of is probably going to turn this into something really cool. So never say no. And so when people ask me to produce, I went for it. And somehow these two worlds of music and producing have coexisted and have served each other in an interesting way.
This episode is sponsored by Dorico, the future of scoring. And we want to feature real Dorico users so you can know that real composers out in the world today are using Dorico to make their careers happen.
My name is Ricardo Matosinhos, and I'm a horn player, I'm a teacher, and also a composer. As a composer, I love the way, for the first time, I can write music directly in Dorico. Because in other software, sometimes I feel that I cannot be really creative. For the first time on a software, I simply started to play on the piano without thinking about the key signature, about the metric. Let's simply play like if I was playing my own instrument. And then, of course, the way you can write the music and then adjust it, like make a specific rhythm longer, shorter, like if you were making notes on a piece of paper.
Would you recommend Dorico?
Yes, for sure. And there are some people starting to use Dorico in Portugal, most of them because of me. A few months ago, a friend asked me if I was interested in giving some Sibelius presentation. But I told him I don't use Sibelius anymore. I don't use Sibelius. Why? So what are you using? I told him about Dorico. And the Portuguese teachers need to make mandatory trainings every year. So I started to make these Dorico training sessions with teachers, some composers, some are not really composers, they just write exercises for their students. And actually, I convinced the major music publisher in Portugal to adopt Dorico. I really feel that we are just on the surface of this software. In the beginning, if you went to the Facebook Dorico page, there are a few people asking for things, how can I make this or that in Dorico? And there were some people complaining, oh, Dorico isn't able to do this or that. And now those voices are going away and more people are seeing the light of Dorico. So I'm really looking forward what Dorico 3 will bring us.
The kind folks at Dorico have set up a special web page so you can go and download a free 30-day trial copy of Dorico. So go and do that. I have been using the program and I'm absolutely in love with it. Go to dorico.com/TPC. I love how you're framing this. This is something that I've been speaking about on the podcast for almost 5 years now. The idea of serving the needs of the people that we want to reach out to. And that's exactly how you framed it. You said, I'm filling a need and providing emotional insurance. And that's a very startup entrepreneurial way of describing your niche, the thing that you do.
That's actually the mistake that we made in Startups 1.0, which is we did not think about what the needs of our users were, our audience was, our customers, who they were, what they wanted. We were so enamored with the technology and what it could do that we thought, we'll just build it and people will come. And so we built a lot of really cool stuff. And that's why you don't see most of those startups alive and well today. They all went by the wayside because they were building something that for the sake of building it.
Yes.
Because it was cool and not where things have graduated to in Internet 2.0, where it's really demand-based. You're constant. The whole term of pivoting has come from the fact that you build something thinking you think it's cool, and then people tell you it's not, and then you pivot to what they think is cool, what they really want, and you have to let go. You have to kill your darlings and treat it as not at all precious. Just like being a successful filmmaker or composer who realizes that that ending really doesn't work the way you thought it would. People have given you their feedback and they really want something different there. And you really do have to listen to that voice or those voices and see how you can integrate what they need with what you need. I mean, storytelling is very much a personal endeavor and need, but at the same time, it's something you are doing to share. So I'm writing music for a scene, but it's not just for my ears or the director's ears. It's also for the audience.
Yes.
If it doesn't work for the audience, then who are we doing this for? Why are we even putting it out? Let's make something that's really great and not have any concern about where it goes. But we are doing it for the goal of sharing so that it can be bigger than what we think it is.
Yeah, it's this funny balancing act. You have to be able to say on one level, you don't have to like my music. I didn't make it for you. But on the other hand, you're literally trying to serve someone. That's the audience, the story, the director. And then you're like, this is for that purpose. And even for art music or concert music that doesn't have, it's not married to picture or something like that.
Right.
It's still true, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I think what the audience, I have found the trick to be, and I don't know if a trick is the right word, but certainly what that balance of serving my needs as an artist and serving the audience's needs, and I include the director in the category of audience. How do you serve their needs simultaneously? And I'm looking at it as not serving a specific need for the audience, but serving that existential need. Like what Steve Jobs had once said, you've got to figure out and give people what they don't know they need yet.
Right.
And so that's where we as artists really have to think 2 steps ahead. We've got to invent something that people haven't yet thought of. And so it's that sound. Like I thought about, who am I so excited about listening to or watching? And why do I get such a thrill out of their work? It's because it's giving me something new. It's giving me something unexpected, and it's surprising and it's innovative. But at the same time, it's not so abstract and so far out there that it doesn't please me or satisfy some entertainment or some baser need that I just happen to find appealing. So filmmakers like Fincher or Soderbergh, or composers like Johan Johansson or Johnny Greenwood and folks like that, they're working within a medium that has some familiarity, but at the same time, they're doing something that's new and innovative and surprising. And it makes me, I just can't tell you how excited I am when they share new work, because I feel myself growing when I get exposed to that work. And at the same time, it's not so comfortable that I'm being lulled into just this familiar place.
Right. But I have a question for you. So oftentimes, like when I'm working with independent film directors, because I've done a few independent films, they have an idea of kind of the emotion they want to get, but they don't really know what they want. And there's that famous quote from Henry Ford. He said, if you ask people what they want, and this would be like in 1905, they'd say a faster horse. Instead, he builds the automobile. And so there's that kind of what comes first. How are you helping the directors narrow down on what it is they want so that you can deliver it?
Well, it's funny that we're quoting entrepreneurs in this creative discussion, but obviously there's so much overlap. But I think what Henry Ford was doing was looking beyond the surface need of, okay, we want a faster horse. That's what we want. But what we really need is a faster way of getting from point A to point B. So however you do that, that's really what will serve my need. And so I tried to tackle that problem of what does the storyteller want? Well, look beyond the want and get to the need, because they may be saying that, yeah, I really want something warm and soothing here. I just know I want, but they're trying to go for something innovative or something refreshing, something new. And yet they keep pulling towards maybe tried and true sounds. And I will try to give them something that can give them that cozy feeling that they're after, but at the same time, give it to them in an unconventional way. So it's still giving them that other part, which is they also asked for, or they look at the context, which is a film that's innovative, or it's taking chances and making sure that the surface want isn't sacrificing the greater need that they want or that they need. It's tricky. It's very tricky because you're trying to, it's almost like psychoanalysis.
Right. It is 100%. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when someone has an addiction and they are, whether it's to alcohol or it's to another substance or it's a behavior, that's just the surface. That's a symptom of another issue or another need. And the challenge of the analyst is to discover with their client, how do I get to figure out what need you really have to address? And in a lot of ways, that's what I'm doing with my filmmakers. I have a couch in my studio, and during the spotting session, those are the kind of questions I will be posing them, which is, where did the story come from? What was the inspiration for it? What in your life got you here. And we talk about their background. We talk about how that intersected with this story. Why this story now? I really tried to get into the DNA of the process and their story and this story that we're trying to tell, and see where these worlds collide and overlap. And then you find out, okay, this filmmaker is trying to serve this need, and that is way deeper than what's on the screen.
Yes.
And so now I have an insight into what the music should be delivering emotionally. And it's tricky because a lot of times audiences won't really get that. They will feel what the music is trying to do rather than hear what it's trying to do. And it'll speak in another language than what they are expecting, but it's serving a greater need rather than just the base of, is this a thrilling moment? Is this delivering on that plot point?
Mm-hmm.
To give an example, so on the interpreters, the filmmakers were telling a story about translators who are local to Iraq, Afghanistan, and they are embedded with the coalition forces, the US, Europe, and other parts of the world, who have sent troops to keep the peace in those hot zones. And these men are risking their lives by aligning with the forces that are seen as invaders, not peacekeepers in those parts of the world. So see, these men and their families end up becoming targets. So it's a very high risk thing that they're doing. And it's also about loyalty, questions of loyalty between what they've seen in their country and what they want for their country, and seeing the future. And it's about modernity, and it's about their cultural legacy, and it's questioning all of those things. So when I was doing the music for this, when I talked to the directors, we went over all of those themes and those overlapping narratives and motivations of these characters. And what I ended up with was a score that was not stereotypically Middle Eastern. It wasn't stereotypically a story about what it meant to be in that part of the world and just being location based. I love scores that do that, but I knew that the challenge that we had was a little bit different, because it's also about this clash of cultures and how you have people from that part of the world wanting to get out of that really difficult situation and helping Americans, for example, to advance a strategy that is also very controversial and very difficult to wrap our heads around. But they saw a path there. And the United States, the big story of the film is that the United States would offer these men a special visa if they were to do this very sensitive work with the American troops. And most countries did this as well. The challenge was that, and the real heartbreaking part of the story is that the United States dragged its feet on honoring those visas. And so you've got thousands of these translators who have put their lives at risk, and then expect that when the troops leave, that they will be able to go as well. They'll be able to come to the United States and settle alongside the men and women that they fought with and tried to defend, and they've been hung out to dry. And so many of these translators have been attacked, they've been persecuted, they've been killed, and their families. So, and this is not just a Trump thing, it's not a new administration thing. This has been an issue even during the Obama administration. So these were things that we talked about, but we didn't specifically say that's what the music needs, but it felt natural, and it felt like it was speaking in a way that felt timeless, but also was speaking towards the future and also felt thrilling. So ultimately it's scoring this film as though it's a thriller, because that's what was going on. We didn't know if these men were going to make it out alive. We didn't know if their families were going to survive or be allowed to come with them. So what was on the surface of just a dry political discussion turned into something much more, because I was trying to address this bigger need that an audience would be looking at, and that the directors were telling me in their accounts of filming this, that that's what this is really about.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. And I love how you were able to really narrow down on what the story's really about. It's not just what's apparent on the surface. Simon, this has been a great conversation, and I would love to maybe do a round 2, because there's much more for us to discuss. But
sure,
I've got to go and pick up my daughter.
Of course, yeah. And I'm really long-winded, so that doesn't help.
It's great. I love the stories. Stories are better. They're the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a 6-year-old, so I can totally relate to the challenge of picking them up from school and all of that. So
yeah. Well, Thankfully, my daughter's at ukulele and guitar club right now after school. So she's out there making music, and
Wow.
that just makes my heart so happy. So
Yeah.
I'm
yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Garrett.
Conductor Sir Simon Rattle says, Encoda is really clever. It's like a view into the future of making music. As digital sheet music and performing off of tablets grows in popularity and convenience, the need to easily access high-quality scores, to be able to mark up the scores, and to be able to share those markups with performers, students, and composers continues to grow. Encoda is the new home of digital sheet music. With access to music from the world's greatest publishing houses, Encoda can't be beat. And soon, through Escobar Digital, composers will be able to add their music to the database so performers can easily access their music. And the composer gets paid for it. Check it out now by downloading the app from your app store for a free trial. That's Encoda, spelled N-K-O-D-A. Encoda. This episode of The Portfolio Composer has been supported by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Whether you're a composer or arranger, a teacher or student, working in music engraving and publishing, or working in producing music for media such as film, TV, and games, Dorico is the tool for you. Dorico comes in two versions. Dorico Pro for professionals, and Dorico Elements, providing the perfect introduction to the world of scoring. Whichever version you choose, you'll be using software packed full of smart features that produces beautiful results completely automatically, allowing you to get music on the stand more quickly than with any other software. You can bring music into Dorico from your existing software using Music XML or MIDI, and you can try Dorico out completely free of charge for 30 days by downloading a trial version from dorico.com/TPC. Try it today.